Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name's Scott Ottman and I lead the ArcGIS Solutions Group here at ESRI. And joining me today is Chris Fox from our solutions team and Carrie Rasmussen from the sales team here at ESRI. And we wanted to provide you with an overview of our address solutions for state and local government. We want to keep this workshop really interactive, so don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. We do have a few places where we'll break for specific questions specific questions, but we're glad to take them along the way and take them incrementally. We want this time to be productive for you. I think everyone's muted, so you may not be able to just jump in and say it. If you can unmute yourself, don't hesitate to do so. If you want to raise your hand, we'll unmute you and then you can ask your question, or you can just drop it in the chat, whatever works best for you. But like I said, the most important thing for us today is for this to be a productive session for you. I'm going to start with a few slides to set context and then turn it over to Chris. And we're going to spend the bulk of our time today really going through the address data management solution. And our goal is to really help you understand clearly what capabilities are provided, how you can leverage those capabilities in your organization, and even configure and extend them to meet specific needs. Some of you, based on the survey results we saw, are already using our ArcMap-based solutions. Some of you have even looked at the ArcGIS Pro solutions. And so if you have specific questions about migration from our current solution or even tools that you might be using now, we'll try to address those too. And like I said, just don't hesitate to jump in and throw those at us. So let's go ahead and get started. For those that aren't familiar with ArcGIS solutions, ArcGIS solutions provide industry-specific maps and apps that come with our software. And we sit at the intersection of business technology, and our mission is to really help you maximize the investment you're making in location-based data and technology. We develop the ArcGIS solutions we provide with the software by partnering with communities like yourself to understand the requirements you have, the conditions you're using location-based data and technology, and ultimately take the best practices that we see in the industry and the requirements that we gather through working with customers and ship it in the product so everyone can benefit from those experiences. Today, we're going to talk about the address solutions, and this is probably, quite frankly, one of our longest standing data management solutions we have. It's gone through several enhancements and upgrades that are based on the technology and also feedback we've gotten from the community. The most important thing to understand about ArcGIS solutions is there's probably two real important things. One is they're designed to help you maximize the investment you're making and close the gap between what our core software technology does and what you do every day in your locales. But they also come with ArcGIS. They come with the software you've already licensed, and they're fully supported. So there's no additional cost for anything we're going to show you today. Clearly, you need to license ArcGIS to leverage them, but you don't have to buy anything else on top of it. So our mission really is to help you solve those common business needs you have in your organization by providing you a set of focused maps and apps and an integrated set of workflows that help you orchestrate the ArcGIS products we provide and leverage that investment you're making in location-based technology and data. You can think of it as a standard roadmap or a roadmap for standard capabilities in your organization and how you really can expand the reach and take advantage of new technology. We also want to help you really stay current and avoid legacy technology. And the address data management space is a really good example of that. We know that in the market, many of you might be using tools that your CAD vendors provided or that were developed through custom projects or through projects you have. And those are on older versions of our technology, and moving from those old versions to new versions of ArcGIS can be challenging, and you really have to sequence those things appropriately in your organization. And so one of the big things we do as a team is really ensure that the solutions we provide not only work on the version of the software that they've been developed on, but they're continuously evolving and are supported in new versions of ArcGIS. And we'll talk about it a few times today, but we do work collaboratively with the community to ensure that the best practices that we see and the industry tradecraft, which in this case, in addresses, we're talking about industry tradecraft that directly impacts the layers that you manage and the content within those layers are incorporated in the product, so it's just easy for everyone to get started. So today we're going to talk about addresses, and there's really kind of, as you guys all know, addresses are one of, if not the most fundamental data set at a local level, certainly in the top 2 or 3. At the local level, addresses are used not only for E911 purposes, but for permitting, assessment and change notices, elections, and a whole host of service delivery actions you take, and mailing actions you take to deliver things like assessment bills or assessment change notices, tax bills, and things like that, and even water and sewer bills. In the 911 space, but beyond that even, right, there's been a lot of kind of growing need to aggregate that information. So whether it's, a county aggregating data for all of its cities or municipalities, or it's the state aggregating all that information into a statewide data set from the counties that maintain this information, right? There is a great deal of need and a great desire to get these aggregated data sets at larger geographies for things like next gen 911, permitting, environmental permitting especially, and even things like voter registration and health and human services that state agencies are delivering. So with that context in mind, we developed a set of solutions that really simplify the address data management workflows in a local government. That's our primary audience, right? The local address authority in your municipality. That could be a city, or in your locale. Could be a city, township, or village. It could be the county. You guys decide what's appropriate for your organization. But ultimately, the solutions we're going to show you today are really designed for those address authorities, or that organization who serves as the address authority. The first solution we're going to spend most of our time talking about today is address data management, and that is a configuration of ArcGIS Pro that's designed to help maintain those authoritative address layers. We also have a complementary solution called Address Field Operations, which is designed to extend kind of desktop or traditional data management workflows and engage internal and external stakeholders to improve the quality of your address information, and then even begin to go out and conduct field inspections or field assignments to validate address information and pick up new addresses where maybe you're missing commercial suite addresses in a development, or apartment addresses, and you want to kind of add, kind of improve the quality of that information. And the third solution we have is community addresses, and this is designed to really serve those aggregation needs where I need to take source address information that maybe in one format, transform it and load it into a set of layers, maybe at the county level or at the region or state level. And community addresses allows those addressing authorities to manage their information in the formats that they need, and then transform that into and push that content into a target data set. If I were to summarize some of the key challenges that we're trying to address with these solutions, we want to help you develop that authoritative address repository. And many times, especially recently, that conversation has revolved around, what do I need for 911? And that's clearly important, but we also want to support the diverse information needs in a local government. So really, 911 is just one. It's an important use of address information, clearly, but it's just one of the many uses of that address information. And so when we think about an address repository, we're not just thinking about center lines, but we're also thinking about site addresses, postal addresses, facilities in some cases, or common places they may call it in the public safety community. But the goal is to help you organize all of that information and then share it through a standard set of locators that can be integrated in a variety of third-party systems. So we want to help you build that repository and address some of those challenges associated with getting new address information into your system. We also want to help you continuously improve that data and validate that information over time. We know that no address data set is perfect, and so this continuous evaluation and feedback is critical. And then ultimately, when necessary, aggregate that information from a variety of sources to build these larger data sets. In terms of the address layers Chris is going to show you today, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how you can take a lot of the guidelines that exist in the address community, whether that's Next Gen 911 or your state's modified version of those NENA guidelines, the Postal Service and other standards that we see out there or guidelines that we see out there, and how would you physically organize that data in ArcGIS? What are the right layers? How are those layers related to each other? And so what you're going to see when you deploy the solution is you actually get a strongly typed set of layers that help you do that in ArcGIS. And our goal, many times people ask us, are the layers in the address solution NG911 compliant? And they'll use that term. And what you'll find is that the layers in our addressing solutions are not modeled exactly like the NG911 guidelines, because quite frankly, that's a transfer standard or a publication environment, I might call it. But what you'll find is all of the characteristics that are in the mandatory and many of the optional fields in the NG911 data set or data guidelines are incorporated, and you can publish that content in that format. The other thing you'll find is that all of the layers are fully documented, so you can discover the exact fields that are in these layers and begin to think about how you may need to configure it to meet your specific needs. So what I'll do now is let's turn it over to Chris and let him really spend the bulk of our time together just kind of showing you guys the addressing solution. So Chris, I'll stop sharing and you can take it from here.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so we're going to start with the address data management solution. Here you can see I'm in ArcGIS Pro. And when you deploy the address data management solution, you'll get an ArcGIS Pro project with some sample databases, a map, layers configured, ready to use. So two of the databases that we include with the project are a schema-only database. So this has the addressing layers that Scott mentioned and showed that incorporate many of those guidelines that were discussed. And we also include a sample database, file geodatabase, that can be used to test out the workflows in the solution and exercise the capabilities. Everything that I'm going to show you today is actually using the sample data. So you could run through these same workflows that I'm going to show using that sample data. We also include an ArcGIS Pro task. And tasks are really great in ArcGIS Pro because they help guide you through the workflows that could be potentially complex if you tried to find all that functionality within ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro is a really rich desktop GIS application, has a lot of functionality. For these workflows, we don't need to take advantage of all those capabilities. So the task helps guide me through those workflows and expose the tools that I need in the context of the workflow I'm trying to complete. So the first step in the task is understanding the address data management solution. And this is what we talk about in terms of what's included, the series of layers that follow the guidelines. We've also configured a set of attribute rules, and I'll talk a little bit more about attribute rules and how they streamline the editing workflows. We also include a pre-configured data reviewer check or a set of checks that you can use to find potential errors in your site address points and your street center lines. So one of the very first things you might do when you're, for example, we have a new subdivision and we need to add that information into our address repository. So what I'll typically do is first I would want to create the road center lines. So I can use this task of adding a new road. The first step in adding a new road is adding a value to the master road name table. So this master road name table that we deliver with the solution helps to ensure the integrity of the road center lines and site address points in my community. It contains all the unique road names that exist in my address repository. And it has all the different designations of a roadway broken into the separate fields. This is something that, for example, you'll see in the NENA NextGen 911 standard, breaking out the individual components of the roadway into individual fields. And then we combine those into a full road name. So in this particular case, I'm adding a new road. It's a new unique name. So I'm going to add a new record into the master road name table. So I can click in the row. And for the direction, you can see we have a domain pick list that follows the common standards. So I'm going to say that this one is going to be West Oak and then the road type is street. All right, when I commit this edit, you can see currently the full road name is empty. When I commit it, it calculates the full road name for me automatically. And what's triggering this is an attribute rule that's configured on this master road name table that concatenates all the individual components of the road name into a full road name. And it's dynamic. So when I insert a new record or when I update, so if I change this from west to east, it's automatically going to update that full road name. So this helps ensure integrity and reduces the amount of data entry that I have to do. For municipality, this is going to be in Naperville. And this will be a pending road because we just have a proposed new subdivision that hasn't been completed yet. Next step is I'm going to run a tool that's included in the project to update the road name index. And this road name index is a domain that exists on the road center lines and the site address points. And it ensures when I construct a new roadway or when I construct a new address point that I'm only able to pick a road name that exists within my master road name table. Now let's construct the new road. In addressing, important information on the road center line includes the address range of that roadway. And you can see here in the data model that we support a left from, left to, right from, and right to. When I construct a new road, in many cases, I'll be intersecting an existing road. And what I want to happen is I need to, at the location of that intersection, I need to split the line and I need to update the address range so that they reflect the new split along that roadway. And what the solution provides as part of the construction tool and the attribute rules that are configured is it will do that for me automatically. So if you look at North Mill Street, it starts at 1001 and on the left side and goes to 1041. When I click and draw this new road, it's actually going to split Mill Street at that intersection. And you can see the first segment here goes from 1001 to 1031 now. And then the next segment picks up at 1033 and continues on to 1041. And so it did that calculation based on the range of the road and the distance along the road where the split or the intersection occurred. I can always update these values if they don't actually reflect what they should. So I could change these values and update them. But this tool gives me a quick start to splitting that road and defining or calculating an approximate new range for that roadway. For my new road, what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the attributes. Another thing, when I inserted my new road, it calculated a new centerline ID for me. And this is configured via an attribute rule and a database sequence. So every time a new row or record is inserted into the table, it's automatically going to pull the next sequence value out and give me a new unique centerline ID so that you don't have to key that in and you don't have to manage it yourself. For the left from, I'm going to say for this road, it's 101 to 299, and the right side is 100 to 298. And then the full road name is going to be West Oak Street. So you can see that I have a pick list, and this domain is driven from the master road name table. So I can only select a value, including that new one that I just entered earlier. Oops. I can also update some of the additional details about the roadway. Depending on the type of road, you'll have potentially different designations. So for like a state highway, you can add additional information for this local road. This could also be a county route. I can enter information about what's on the left and right side of that road. For example, the country, state, county, and municipality. In many cases, you're typically always working in the same state, or you may always be within the same county. So you could update the feature templates when you're constructing these to default the state left and right and county left and right, country left and right to the same value every time you construct a new road. In this case, I'll enter for the municipality that this is within Naperville on both the left and right. And hit apply. Okay. One last thing that we can do with the roadways is I can add a alias name. So in many cases, a roadway may have one or more aliases. And so what you can do is we're modeling this in a related table, and I can relate the alias names to the road center line. And this also is something that is used in the next gen 911 standard as well. And you can see the schema is very similar to the master road name table, where we're providing all the different designations in separate fields, and will automatically calculate the full road name by concatenating the individual parts. So here I could have multiple alias names associated with my road name. So I'll finish that task. So now we've added a new road. The next step we want to do is construct some new site address points. We have a couple building footprints here. So let's zoom in a little bit and start this task. So when adding new site address points, we provide two feature templates to construct those address points, either on the right or the left side of the road. And you can see we have the arrow symbology here to indicate the digitized direction of the roadway. So I'm going to use this construction template for the right side. I can specify a distance that I want to offset the site address from the roadway. And I'm going to hover and snap to the road and click and click. And what it does is it offsets and creates a site address point 75 feet from the road. You can also see that it automatically calculated an address number and pulled the full road name from the intersection of that point to construct a full address. This address number is based on the address range of the road and the distance along the road where I placed that address point. And this is often, for example, could be the driveway, it could be the curb cut. It gives you an approximate location of where that address is off of. I can always update this value. So if this isn't completely accurate, I can change it to 164 and apply, and you can see the full address updates via that attribute rule. So you have complete control over that, but we provide a good starting point based on the address range of the road. Let me repeat that on the left side so I can do the same. And this time, because I'm constructing on the left side, I should be getting odd address numbers because the parity on the left side is odd. Parity on the right side of the road is even. Some additional things that you can do with these construction tools is, in many cases, there may be multiple units with the same address number. So in this case, I'm going to, let's say that this is a multi-unit building. I'm going to offset by 100 feet. I'm going to create 5 site address points and click. And what it's going to do is it's going to stack 5 site address points, all with the same address number. And now what I can do using the additional fields in the attributes, I can select all of them, and I can use these alternate address unit types and address unit number fields to construct additional information about that site address. So in this case, let's say, for example, that this is apartment A. Hit apply. You can see that the full address updated automatically. And these are all on floor 1. And then I'll select an individual one and say that this is unit 101. And I could repeat that for the additional units. We provide several levels deep. I think you can go up to 5 levels deep in the data model for these additional unit types and unit numbers to give you really fine-grained control on the address. And this is becoming more important and particularly important in 911 workflows where we want to have really precise routing to locations, especially in large buildings where there's lots of units. multiple floors, etc. And because ArcGIS Pro is a 2D, 3D application, you could see a scenario where you could visualize these site address points in 3D as well and extrude them based on their floor location, so you can see them in vertical space in 3D where those actual site address points are. Once I've constructed and updated the attributes on those site address points, I can use the out-of-the-box tools to select and move the addresses. So although we offset from the street off of the road, there's nothing preventing you from repositioning these site address points. And in this multi-unit building scenario, I might want to have more precision about where these actual site address points are and where they actually reflect where they are in the building. So I relocated them along this building footprint. Additional metadata that you can have about the site address point are postal addresses. And this is an important distinction. There's a difference between the physical address and the postal addresses that may be associated with that physical address, especially in the scenario where you might have, for billing and permitting perspectives, you might have different owners' mailing address from the actual occupant of the location. So in this case, we're using a related table for postal addresses. I'm going to right click and add a new record to the relationship. And I can start typing in some details about the owner. It's going to pull automatically the address from the site address point into the postal address. But again, this could be different. It could be a PO box. It could be someplace else in terms for the owner. And then we're using the USPS standards for the additional fields and creating that postal address. And then for the owner occupant field, I can specify what they are. So in this case, it's an owner. I could have another related postal address for the occupant as well. And then another piece of metadata that you can have associated with the site address point are entrance points. This again is also something that we see used in 911 workflows, where an address might be off of one road, but a better entrance or driveway to the building might be off of a different road. And so in this case, for example, this address is off of Oak Street, but there's actually a driveway off of North Mill Street. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct this driveway point off of this road, and then I'm going to select the site address point, and I'm going to relate them together. So I can right click on site addresses and say add selected to relationship. So now my site address point is related to the original address point, or the curb cut, or the location where it was addressed off of. It's related to a postal address, and it's also related to a driveway entrance. And so I have the complete metadata and information about that site address point. So that's adding new site addresses and constructing them. The last thing that I want to do in terms of talking about site addresses and going through this editing workflow is updating the road names. So I talked about the scenario where I got a proposed new development. Let's say that through the process, that road name, the official road name, is changed. And that often happens when we're going through this phase. So rather than having to manually update everything, what I'm going to do is manage that in the master road name table. So West Oak Street has been determined to be changed to Elm Street. So I'm going to update that record in my master road name table, and then I'm going to apply that edit. And what happens is it automatically updates the road center line, and it updates the address points that are off of that center line. Everything has been updated to Elm Street. You see I'm getting an error right now that's saying that the field doesn't fall within the domain. And that's because I need to rerun this road name index tool to update that domain based on the change that I made to the master road name table. And once that completes, Elm Street's now in the domain and it's valid, and Oak Street no longer shows up in that domain. Some additional editing tools that we include are the ability to flip the road direction, the digitized direction, which, as I showed you, was important. We use that to determine what is the right side and what's the left side. So you can select one or more roads and flip them. You can also swap the parity. So you can swap the left from left to with the right from right to. So if odd is on the wrong side of the road, you can swap that parity. You can also create intersection points. So by selecting a road and running this tool, it's going to find all the roads that intersect that road, create an intersection point, and it's going to pull the cross street information into an attribute. So many people use intersection points for a lot of different reasons, but this tool provides a quick way to generate those intersection points automatically. And finally, what we can use this solution to do is to validate some of our address information. And we do validation using the Data Reviewer extension for ArcGIS Pro. And Data Reviewer can be used to validate, maintain, and improve the integrity of your address information. We deliver a collection of pre-configured checks that help you identify common errors in your address information. And so the way that you do that, I'm going to clear my selection. I'm going to zoom to a new area, a new extent. And I'm going to go to Edit, Manage Quality. And I'm going to run the reviewer rules. You can run these for a selection set. You can run them for the current visible extent, or you can run them for the entire data set. At this point, I'm running them for the visible extent. And you can see that it found 2 errors. And so let's take a look at these errors. One thing that's helpful when exploring these errors is to symbolize them on the map. So I'm going to click this button to symbolize the results. Hide the master road name table. Zoom out a little bit. So you can see there's an error here with this road and this site address point. So let's first take a look at the road. In this case, the check that failed is the road right side address range is invalid. And it has some notes here that says it fails if the right from or right to fields are 0 or null, or if the right from is greater than or equal to the right to. So what I can do is select that road, and let's explore the attributes. So it's saying the left or the right from is incorrect. In this case, right from is 541 and right to is also 541, so they're identical. So this may have been a data entry error, a typo. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 501 and hit apply. And then for this check, I can right click, update the results, and I can say that I've resolved it and updated the right from address range. In this check, my notes that I used, and when I did this, when I ran these results and when I resolved it, are all stored in a database. So I can always go back and look at the results and understand the checks that were run, the failures, and how I resolved them. So it gives you, as part of that QA process, that history of the work that you did. So I'm going to apply that change. And now let's look at the site address point. So in this case, it's saying site address is not within 500 feet of related road. So it's saying the check will fail if the site address is not within 500 feet of the road with the related full name. So let's select this site address point. And this is saying it's 1105 North Mill Street. So it's off of North Mill Street, which is over here. It happens to be more than 500 feet. But in this case, it's acceptable. This check is used to find site addresses that are nowhere near or not close to the road that they say they should be. That often is due to typos or data entry errors, assigning something to the east or the North Mill Street rather than South Mill Street, for example. Those types of things can happen very easily. In this case, it is accurate that this is off of North Mill Street. It just happens to be quite a distance away. And you can customize the distance that you want to use for this search. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say update results. And I'm going to mark this as an exception. And I'm going to say that this is valid site, valid address off of North Mill, and hit apply. And by marking it as an exception, the next time I run the checks, it won't be flagged for that particular check and it won't be caught. So I can have exceptions to my rules. And we know in our data, often that's the case. I know I've talked to a lot of customers who addresses have been assigned for a really long time and they don't always follow consistent rules. So we need to have that flexibility to be able to mark things as exceptions. So that's the data reviewer functionality. That's the key workflows that we wanted to describe in using address data management. The additional workflows that we have here in the bottom of the task walk you through how you can configure the solution to meet your needs. So what you'll want to do is review the schema that we provide, understand what information is included, see how that aligns with your current data model if you have it. For those of you who are using the ArcMap solution, the data models are very similar. We made some minor changes to incorporate some things to account for the NINA standard and other enhancements that we've learned along the way, but they're very similar to the address data management solution for ArcMap. After you review the schema, we walk you through defining the spatial reference for this schema database. We deliver it in Web Mercator, but of course you'll want to project it into your local coordinate system. We then walk you through how you can configure the maps, layers, and rules. So updating the layers in this map to point to the schema database, updating the layers by adding any new fields or configuring domains, and then how you can customize the attribute rules. Many of the automated workflows that I did in this solution are leveraging attribute rules in ArcGIS Pro. If you've been using our ArcMap solution, you've probably used Attribute Assistant. And although it's a similar concept, there is not parity between Attribute Assistant and attribute rules. The way that you define them is different and the capabilities are different. But inherently what you're doing is you're writing rules that are going to respond to edit events. So when you create a new feature or you update a feature or you delete a feature, you can trigger events to update attributes, update geometry, or you can add things like constraint rules that prevent you from entering data that's invalid. So there's lots of things that you can do with attribute rules. And we've pre-configured many of the common ones, but you may want to extend the rules that are included to meet your specific needs. After you've configured the layers and the rules, you'll load your data. So we walk you through loading your data into the data model. If you are going to be leveraging the solution in ArcGIS Enterprise and you have your own enterprise database that you want to manage this solution in, we walk you through how you can copy the feature classes, and along with that come all the rules that are already configured into ArcGIS Enterprise. And then finally, you can configure the data validation. So you can add your own custom checks, you can extend and customize the rules and the validation that you run against your data. So that's an overview of the address data management solution. I think I've seen some questions come in. Maybe we take some time to talk about those now.
Yeah, let's do that, Chris. Hey, while you're still sharing, Chris, one of the questions, and we've heard this before, there's the concept of a fishbone, right? Or show me, okay, this address is related to this, or this site address is related to this address point. Can you just, what does that look like in the ArcGIS Pro workflow? Can you just show how you can pick an address point and see all the related site addresses and everything?
Yeah,
or
so
how the data is hung together.
Yeah, so if I look at the attributes here, I can select the address point, and then through the relationship, I can find all the related site address points. So we don't have anything to symbolize that on the map, but I can navigate those relationships using the attributes pane to do that. It is something that we've heard, and it kind of be interesting to think about a tool that could automate and generate lines connecting those things.
Mm-hmm. And then the other, also, I forget which checks we include in out of the box, but is there anything to check, like the sequence of address ranges, or like how they, if you're doing more logical ranges, are there ways to find if the ranges either overlap or are out of sequence?
Yeah, so in the current solution that we have, there's not any of those checks, but we're going to talk about it later in the presentation. We're working on an update for this solution that we're looking to release later this year that will have additional checks, and one of the checks will find overlaps in address ranges in terms of the street center lines. I've heard some feedback about gaps. For some people, gaps are important, and others gaps aren't. So I'd be curious if there's feedback from this community of whether identifying gaps are important.
A lot of that would depend on whether you're using logical or actual ranges on those roads. There's a couple other questions that came in. One was, so there, David had a question about the idea of like the 911, the actual address they have for the 911 and the postal address, the name, perhaps they use a different road name. Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about how, like when I signed that original postal address, how it brings the street name over, but you can always update it, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah. So the physical address we're modeling in one way, and that's the location that is often assigned by the municipality. The postal address might differ slightly from that. We're managing that in the related table. When you add a new postal address, we'll automatically pull that site address into the postal address, and it can always be updated or changed or modified from that.
So I think that answers your question, David. The other thing, just why we're on that concept of postal addresses, I know there is also that's where we incorporated a lot of the article. I think it's Article 19 requirements that the Postal Service has. I forget the exact number, where prefix, suffix, and all of the kind of requisite. You also see a lot of the postal standards incorporated in the unit designations as well. Mm-hmm. So that's all in there out of the box. So it's simple for you to kind of take advantage of. Mm-hmm. Carrie, are there other questions, comments, I guess, that we need to?
I think you got most of them, but I did have a question that was sent to me separately that asked if there's disparity between the USPS places and city boundaries, how would you handle something like that? So
in terms of the designation between a municipal district and a
mm-hmm.
mailing city?
Yeah,
so that's a really good point. And that is actually one of the critical reasons why you need postal addresses and site addresses. Maybe, Chris, you were going to go there, but mm-hmm. Chris is pointing at the site address now in the demo, and that municipality name is the physical municipality that site address resides in. Many people would call that the taxing district. And then the postal address could have a completely different postal city designation. So, for example, where I live physically in Springfield Township, but my mailing address is Clarkston, Michigan. And that's one of the critical reasons why that designation is important, for sure, because we want to be able to track both.
And that's something we see on the NINA standard. They have both reflected and are important information to have.
Yeah. And the other thing, I did see a comment about it's tough, with coordinating with the Postal Service. No doubt that comes down to relationships with the postmaster, we find most of the time. But the assessor, you have to get tax bills. Sometimes you have to get water and sewer bills there. So someone inside your organization cares a lot about mailing addresses, and it's just kind of getting connected with that group and figuring out how you can leverage content is really important. Okay, so maybe Chris, if there aren't any other questions, we'll give everyone a minute just on the address data management. I can take the control back. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. So Chris talked a lot about address data management, and obviously that's the flagship solution, right? It is that data management offering that helps you kind of take authoritative data that's coming in from subdivision plans and other data that you manage and get it into ArcGIS. But we do have some other solutions that I want to just kind of, oops, am I sharing my screen? There we go. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, good. Hopefully you can. You see my browser, Chris?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, so there are some other solutions I just want to kind of highlight before we wrap up and take additional questions you might have. And I want to show you those through this getting to know story map. So many times, you'll ask us, okay, how do I learn more about these solutions? How do I socialize the capabilities with other stakeholders in my organization? And this story map is a great way to do that because it really provides the business context for the solutions and talks about some of the key capabilities. I'm going to kind of skip the manage address information because Chris did a great job demoing that solution for you and talk a little bit about a couple of the other solutions we have. The first is address field operations. And this is really designed to help you solicit those missing addresses and validate that information. And so what it includes is a survey form called address crowdsourcing. And this survey could be shared with internal stakeholders, other departments that you serve, and some organizations actually share it publicly. And it allows those stakeholders to report missing addresses they see in your data set. And what that does then is start a workflow that allows you to understand where you're getting those missing address reports and create assignments in Workforce that you can hand off to field staff to verify. And then you can perform that verification with our Field Maps application. So you can, go out in the field, validate that in fact the address that reported was a missing address. You can update the characteristics if you'd like. And then maybe you've missed other addresses in that same apartment complex or commercial development. You can capture those at the same time too. And so you can think of address field operations as a way to really augment your desktop or office data management workflows and collect those missing addresses or validate address information in the field in a very simple and straightforward way. And the last solution I want to talk about is community addresses or community data aggregation. And this solution, as we mentioned earlier, is really designed to help you aggregate address information from a variety of sources. And there's really two models that community data aggregation supports. The first is you can think of it kind of as a contributor model. So the state could have a statewide address layer that's accessible maybe through an ArcGIS organization to all of the counties within the state. Those county organizations could have an identity within that organization and push their authoritative addresses to a state agency. And it really allows you to kind of distribute the maintenance and allow those local address authorities to kind of continuously improve the quality of that statewide data set. And they can perform surgical updates of just their data. They can also, extract and transform, their source data layers to the target and the content that's required in that target data set. So that's one model. The other model is the concept of a kind of an aggregator model where the state asks on a regular basis, maybe annually, all of the local address repositories to send them maybe file geodatabases of their address information or shape files or point them to an address layer. And the state can then go through and basically aggregate all of that information and save those kind of source to target mappings and use them each time they do it. And so the community data aggregation solution really provides you a flexible way to do that source to target mapping. And like I said, either push content through to that target layer or aggregate it on a regular basis. So this story map is a really great way for you to kind of understand all of those solutions and how they come together as a comprehensive offering for your community. Let me just go back here to the slides now. Oops, and just go back a few. Let's go back to here. So let's just wrap with a kind of a few final thoughts, and then we can open it up for more questions from the group. And if you have specific questions on your implementation or the work you're doing, we can take those as well. So everything we showed you today is available at solutions.arcgis.com. And I would encourage you to go there and, if I were to, if I go to that site, we can just show you solutions.arcgis.com. And I go to the site, I can come here to the resources page. I can search for address data management. And then quickly discover all of the documentation that's available. So we'll just start with kind of the introduction to address data management. You'll find that this solution is supported on ArcGIS Enterprise 10.9 and in ArcGIS Online. You can also use it just in a simple single user desktop environment with a file geodatabase like Chris talked about. All of the requirements for that solution are documented here, what you get, and any release notes. You'll also find additional documentation on the workflows that Chris highlighted today. So how do I manage my address data? And whether that's center lines or new roads, site addresses, et cetera. And then finally, anything you may need to do to configure this solution. In the case of address data management, most of that content is also included, right there in the Pro project, as Chris showed you. You'll also find, there's some additional workflows that you may want to extend the address data management solution for. And so many organizations use what they call logical block addresses to assign the numbers. Some of you may want to pull information from an intersecting feature. So for example, every time I create a new site address, intersect a polygon of taxing districts and populate the municipal field that Chris showed you earlier. You could do that by extending the rules that we provide out of the box. And so you could do that for zip code or municipality, or maybe even parcel number. We have some people that want to do that as well. So these configure topics will help you extend the solution that comes out of the box and really make them your own in some common ways. Ultimately, once you kind of learn more about the solution, you can just deploy the solution here. You could just click deploy now. This will challenge you to log into an ArcGIS organization. I'm just gonna log in real quick. Actually, let's do this. And once I log in, you'll see I'll be added. I'll go right to the ArcGIS Solutions app and I can hit Get Now. And what this will do is create a copy of the address data management solution in my ArcGIS organization and give me everything I need to get started with that solution. So it's a really simple way for you to get started with the ArcGIS solutions themselves and begin to test drive them in your organization. So in this case, I just deployed address data management. I could download the Pro project, begin to open it up and go through the workflows that Chris showed earlier. So I'd really encourage you to visit the solution site, explore the documentation we provide there, and use it as a way to learn more about the solutions we showed you today. The other thing I would encourage you to do, if you're not a member of the meetup community, please do join that. We have monthly meetups where we share detailed information about all of the ArcGIS. Every month we pick a specific solution, but ultimately we use this as a way to stay connected with the community, to drive enhancements, to share what we're working on. And, I would expect that the first half of next year, we'll probably do one on some enhancements we're making to address data management and our addressing solutions. So that's just a great way to stay connected with the development team and your peers that are using the solutions as a whole. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the road ahead. Chris mentioned this earlier. We're constantly, getting feedback from the community and using that to organize development plans. And we do have a new release of our address data management solution coming later this year. What you'll find in this new solution are a couple key things, or an enhanced solution, I should say, an enhancement to the existing solution. The first thing you'll see is Chris has been working with customers and some new capabilities in ArcGIS Pro to enhance the Data Management Pro project. And we'll be providing some new attribute rules that are available in the latest releases of ArcGIS Pro, additional validation checks to improve the quality of address data and continuously evolve that quality, and new construction methods that help support other workflows. So you could imagine, the workflows Chris showed you today are really designed around maybe placing individual addresses for a given structure, and maybe even the multi-unit scenario that Chris showed. But imagine you need to put in a whole new subdivision. What are some efficient ways to do that? And so you'll see some really nice new workflows inside of Pro to kind of simplify those workflows and simplifies the steps required. The other thing we're working on is a more tightly integrated field validation workflow. Today, we ship address field operations and address data management as two separate solution offerings. We're actually probably going to integrate those two things in this future release and just provide a more integrated way to validate those addresses in the field, to take the field collected addresses and bring them into your editing map, and make them and incorporate them into your address repository. And you can still pick and choose which pieces or capabilities in the solution you want to implement, but it'll be a much more tightly integrated system, and you won't have to deploy two solutions to take advantage of all of those capabilities. And finally, we're also introducing some new public engagement capabilities. So you can, you'll have a starting point if you want to have a public hub site for your address authority where you share your authoritative inventory of addresses, where you share some of the guidelines you may have for address assignment, where you solicit feedback from stakeholders. And this will really extend a lot of the capabilities we have now, and provide you a simple way to kind of share that rich and authoritative address inventory you maintain in your community. So all of these capabilities will be coming in a future release of the address data management solution. We're targeting Q4 of this year, and we expect to hit that. So you'll see some really good things coming in the not too distant future. And so I'll just wrap, and then we can take some more questions, Carrie. So hopefully today you saw that ArcGIS includes a rich set of solutions you can leverage for address data management in your community. And our whole mission is to really help you develop and maintain that authoritative repository and support the diverse needs in local and state government. We want to help you continuously improve this data. We know it's coming from a variety of different sources in your community, and then syndicate that content and essentially treat it as an authoritative source for a whole variety of different use cases. The solutions continue to evolve based on the feedback we get from the community. And hopefully you saw just a few minutes ago that really kicking the tires and deploying these solutions has never been easier. You can just log into your ArcGIS organization, visit the ArcGIS Solutions app, and deploy address data management and begin test driving it in your community with some sample data that you have. So thanks a lot for your time today. Don't hesitate to visit the solution site, join the meetup community, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and we can take any questions you might have, Carrie, that's come in maybe in the last couple minutes.
We have a question from Marvin. He was asking if we are able, oh, my chat just went away. If we're able to show an example of migrating data into the solution.
I guess Chris, you could jump in, but it's hard to without knowing what the source is.
Gotcha.
Let's just demystify for a minute. All of the layers Chris showed you today are just feature classes in a database, a geodatabase. And so, you can, and they're fully documented in that data dictionary we provide with the solution. And, you can simply look at the target layers, compare that to your source, and use append to load content into there. You can use safe FME or data interop if you need to do more advanced ETL processes, or you could use even the data assistant add-in that we provide in community data aggregation to load content into the target layers and begin using the solution. So there's a variety of ways you can get content into the layers. It just really depends on the source and kind of what the format of that source is. So I don't know if that answers your question, Mark, but there's they're just standard layers. And so any of those tools are available. Did I miss anything, Chris? Anything else you can think of?
No, yeah, I think the foundational layers, like the key components, would be you want to create that master road name table. And I
Yep.
get a lot of questions from people who say, well, what do I do if I don't already have that information? And it does make it a little bit more challenging, but there is some geoprocessing tools that you can use to both dissolve based on the full road name of your center lines to create a flattened, unique instances of road names in your community. And then there's a geocoding tool that can actually take a full road name and break it out into the individual components, the individual designations. I think it's the standardized addresses tool that can be used to pull the individual parts of the road name into separate fields. And then you can load that into the master road name table. For the center lines and site address points, yeah, I think it's very much about comparing what your current center lines have. And I think, if you're doing addressing, you're going to see a lot of similarities. You're likely going to have left from, left to, right from, right to. You'll have the road name. So it's just matching up what is the field name in your schema to what it is in the data model of the solution. And you can use the append tool to do some simple data mapping between those two different fields and load in the content. And then the site address points would be very similar as well. The attribute rules will run automatically for some things. So if you don't already have a unique identifier for your roads or for your address points, it will generate one as records are loaded in. So that's a nice way to automatically generate the unique ID as you're loading content in. And the task talks about some of the rules that you might want to disable before you load, so it doesn't execute some of those things. So I would say follow the task, and the task really kind of outlines much of this information.
Chris, just picking up on what you said about the master street name table too. The other thing that we've heard a lot of people doing with that you may be, getting address road center lines from your public safety group. And that's who you've been maintaining, center lines for a while. And now you want to build site addresses, and maybe the best source of site addresses you have, if you don't have any, is your parcel data. And so you create parcel centroids and use the parcel data to create your site address points. And a lot of people over the years have used that master street name table then to go ahead and essentially create consistent representations of that data, right? To clean up and standardize the road names from those two diverse data sources, and use that then. So there's some really, kind of clever ways you can use that master street name table, and the bulk update it applies to the center lines and the site address points to really improve the quality of that data.
Yep.
Thank you. Along the same lines, do you have, you've given us a lot of great tips already. Are there any other tips or tricks that you would recommend for anyone who's migrating over an existing, either from ArcMap or ArcPro, an existing addressing solution to this addressing solution?
I would say for ArcMap, if you're using the address data management solution in ArcMap, you're going to see like I said earlier, you're going to see very similar data model as what you had in address data management. It'd be very easy for you to migrate to ArcGIS Pro in that regard. I think I don't know if we even removed any fields. We might have added some to account for some of the required fields from Nina. The thing to consider when you're migrating from ArcMap is we tried to have parity in terms of the editing workflows and the attribute rules that we configured in the Pro solution. If you've added custom attribute assistant rules, you'll want to consider those and what that functionality does, and you may need to write custom rules, custom attribute rules to have parity with what you did previously in ArcMap. Some things are not possible in attribute rules. But many things are, and there's actually many more things that are possible in attribute rules that you couldn't do in attribute assistant. So that's probably the biggest consideration when you're migrating from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro is any custom attribute assistant rules you add, how that migrates to attribute rules in ArcGIS Pro. And attribute rules use the new Arcade scripting language, which you're seeing in more places in the platform. So if you haven't done anything with Arcade scripting, there's many things that you can do pretty easily. Like if you look at the rules for returning or calculating the full road name, it's actually quite simple. It's pretty straightforward. So I would take a look at the current rules that are configured and see how you might extend those. And there are a lot of samples and examples out there as more people are getting into writing their own attribute rules. With migrating just in general from another data format, if you're not using the address data management solution today, either in ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, I think it's just really understanding, like Scott said, the schema of what we have. We provide a data dictionary where we describe all the fields, what they're intended to store, their purpose. And so reviewing that, comparing that to your current data model, even taking it, into a Word doc or Excel and matching them up, seeing how things align, finding gaps. There's no issue with you adding additional fields to the ArcGIS Pro solution. You can add fields. It's not going to impact the solution at all. We would not recommend that you delete fields or you remove fields because the attribute rules are configured around fields that exist and they expect certain fields. In fact, it won't allow you to delete fields that are being used by attribute rules. So that makes it a little bit more challenging, but you can certainly add your own fields and that will cause no issues in the solution.
And even configure some of the existing fields, right, Chris? As long as you go in there eyes wide open, that you're going to have to not only, update the schema, but also then modify the attribute rules.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
And we tried to write the rules in such a way that we have the fields near the top of the expression so you can see where they're called out. We're doing an even better job as new capabilities come in the next release to make that easier to understand what fields are being used in the rule.
There's another question from Marvin. He was asking, has an authoritative source of postal addresses been aggregated?
I would guess, for the country, probably the closest to that is the census is, that and everything associated with it, but they don't share that information because of Title IX requirements. But yeah, that is the authoritative source of postal addresses for this country. It's just locked up in the Bureau. Gotcha, Marvin. Okay. For you guys. Yes. Don't know about that. Like I said, we find as we work with organizations that, many people go right to the source systems that require those postal addresses. And I've said it for a few times where I tell you, those are billing systems, like your tax bills, water and sewer bills, other places where people are actually shipping mail to folks. The other thing that's interesting, just as an aside, related to postal addresses, the way we've structured that data, you do get reduced mailing rates if you have what they call CAS certified addresses. And that's what you'll find in that postal layer, is that those addresses can very easily go through a CAS certification. And if you do that, it drops your mailing rates, so it saves you money too. But the detail on the postal stuff.
Also had another question, is this being recorded and will the recording be available? And the answer is yes and yes. People talking about different postal districts and issues they're having with that. Apparently more than one. Lots of people dealing with multiple postal districts. Any other questions? Go ahead, Marvin. Oh, I'll unmute you. There you go.
Hi, I was just wanted to thank you all for producing this for us. I think a lot of information has been parsed out to the group. One of the last things I wanted to mention is I'm in a unique situation where I'm a city addressing coordinator who has to coordinate addressing with the county's E911 system. And more or less the process right now is outside of GIS in that a form just dictating that a new address was created, maybe giving the parcel number that the address is being created at, and that's been sent along. I've added a function of incorporating a map into the equation to at least give them some geographic context to it. But I would like to get it to a role of, reconciling my database with their database. And it feels like this is a good direction to go, but have you examples of using this in a distributed collaboration?
Like technically distributed, like at the ArcGIS level, distributed collaboration?
Yeah, just like between two organizations, say
sure.
portal to portal.
Yeah, well, I can go back even before that. In the ArcMap version, Hillsborough County, Florida, and the city of Tampa were working off a common address repository that was hosted by the county, and the city would go in and add site addresses, their address information for the inside the city of Tampa proper. So that kind of collaboration, Marvin, was happening even back before the portal to portal collaboration. Chris, you've been talking to, I think even Tampa and Hillsborough are looking at that for the next generation. You may have some more details with some folks you've been working on because that collaboration's more easier now, but
yeah, most of the organizations that I've talked to, they definitely like the technical approach that the collaboration provides. It seems to be more political and whether they adopt it or not at this point. So that's, I think, the biggest struggle that people are having is whether they want to be that tightly integrated or not.
Then the other thing, the other thing that, related to that, the form, because we hear that a lot, right? Like planning will create a new address, and they'll fill out a form. Like that's one interesting way to think about that address crowdsourcing information product, is it could actually be a new address request form. You could repurpose it, right? And you could capture that location information, the map, right? Instead of quote unquote crowdsourcing from the public, you're just crowdsourcing it from those groups you interact with. And so that's just something to think about, is how you repurpose that. And we're kind of going to in the new version of the solution we're working on for later this year, we're actually going to kind of promote that pattern a little bit more.
We had another question from Kevin, who was asking, is there any movement to an online addressing toolkit in the future?
You want to hit that, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something we're eager to do. We would love to be able to provide a hosted, web-based, simple application to do many of the workflows that I showed. You can see we're using Pro because it's probably the best editing client that we have in ArcGIS, and we're waiting on a few things. One thing to be able to deliver the solution using hosted layers is attribute rules in hosted services. That's on the roadmap, but it's not there yet. So that's one thing that's holding us back. And the other is a richer web editing client that can consume those layers and do the editing workflows that we need to do and honor the attribute rules that are configured on the services. So it's definitely something that we are paying attention to and we're contributing to, and we're working with the core development teams on an approach to that. And when the capabilities are there, we'll definitely be looking forward to releasing a version that leverages simple web editing tools and hosted layers.
Thank you. And Marvin just asked about the attribute rules in ArcGIS Online, but you already answered that. So thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Kevin said there's also a push for addressing and DOH integration. Any cooperation with your roads and highways team on this?
That's a good question. They have some addressing tools that were inspired by the address data management solution that Chris showed you, but the underlying data structures are so different that, you know, it's just a different way to manage the content. So we don't typically find, I mean, you guys may correct me, but we don't, the DOTs and linear referencing is the foundation for address repositories. Typically it's the NG911. So that they're usually separate entities and separate representations for a variety of reasons. So there are some capabilities there if you are a roads and highways user, but it's designed for a different data structure.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any other questions? Do you have any final thoughts, either Scott or Chris?
I don't. I just want to thank everyone for their time today, and certainly don't hesitate to reach out to Carrie and us directly if you have questions as you're starting to migrate to the solution. We're going to continue to evolve the capabilities. We talked a little bit about the work we're doing. Don't let that vapor lock you though, right? Like, I mean, you can get started immediately and take advantage of the capabilities that are there now. But yeah, we really appreciate the time, and don't hesitate to connect with us if you have any other questions.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
So thank you all.
Have a good day, everyone.
We'll end the recording here, and if you have any other questions, just reach out.
Okay, talk
Thanks,
soon, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.